Welcome everybody to this session, A Story of Impact from Moments to Meaning. I'm Jo Roberts, and as a fundraiser of many, many years, I've been in the business of telling stories of impact to the people we want to support us or engage with us, from funders and donors to partners, to help them reach what I like to call their aha moment, where they really want to get involved with us. So from the engagement moment to how they relate to it. And today I'm thrilled that we've got this wonderful panel of four, well, not panel, because we're going to be all very chatty, so don't think about us and them, we're all together. To introduce four people with inspiring stories of how we tell the stories of impact. Then we'd like to open up the discussion to the room, as I said, where we can all share a moment of impact. And I think you have been emailed about, if you have something, a highlight, a droplet that you know that was a moment that really showed, demonstrated your impact on of the organisation that you represent today. But before we do, I just wanted you to come and walk with me a little bit, because last week I was out with my children. I was thinking, what's the essence of this session? What are we talking about? And I was out last week with my children in our local woods, and my two children are still primary school age, and so we were walking through the woods, and there it is, it's beautiful, it's all autumnal colours, and the leaves are falling, and the trees are looking a bit bare, and it's beautiful, and and there's the squirrels and all the rest of it. Anyway, as we're going through the woods, bear with me, this makes sense. And we're going through, and they decide, because they're young children, that they would like to play hide and seek as we do our normal walk through the woods. So off we go, and this goes on for about 20 minutes, bearing in mind the leaves are falling, there's not a lot of cover, there's very thin trees. They're small, so it's fine. So off they go, and this goes on for about 20 minutes. There's my daughter hiding, and there's my son finding it. It's all sounding very lovely, isn't it? And this is what we do every weekend. Anyway, so we go through, and back and forward, lovely, going through the trees. Anyway, we get about 25 minutes through the walk, and my son goes off to hide. Okay, fine, okay. This is near the end of our little stroll. Anyway, we can't find him. My daughter, obviously I'm not really looking for him, and my daughter's out there, and she's 9, she's looking for him, she can't find him, and at this point we're at a little bit of a dark space in the woods. Where is he? Can't find him. This went on for, well, as a mother, this went on for a year, which was about 20 seconds. So anyway, finally, I can see this shape, and he's not behind a tree, and he's not even that well covered. Anyway, so my daughter finds him, obviously. And he's just in a ball. He's just sort of curled up in a ball, not behind a tree, but just over this little hill, beneath some leaves. And I'm like, okay, well done. That's a really brilliant hiding spot. Fantastic. But you weren't really hiding. He's like, Mummy, I was just hiding my face. Okay. He said, because human beings are hardwired to look for human faces. And I was like, so when I was thinking on this walk about the essence of what this whole session is about, I thought, well, there you are. The people that we support can actually tell it much better than we can a lot of the time. And is that not what the people-to-people element of SMP, and while you're all here as members, it's the people-to-people. It's why human beings support other human beings, because we're hardwired to find their faces in everything. With that said, that's my little introduction, and I've been told by these wonderful four people that I don't even have to introduce them. So I'm just going to say it's Kevin with his tomatoes who's coming up first. Over to you, Kevin. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm with Malawi Fruits, and my story is about a project that's about 10 kilometres outside Ekwendeni in the northern region. I'm sure many of you will know Ekwendeni. And I want to introduce you to Martha, who's in this next picture. I love this picture. In fact, I like it so much it's in the SMP photo exhibition, because it's just such a good picture. I think there's life about that picture. There's certainly joy in that picture, but there's something else, and I think it's pride. I think that comes across. Martha is very proudly holding these peppers that she's grown. She has 60 colleagues in the cooperative, and 60 women, and they grow the most amazing tomatoes and peppers in greenhouses. And this project has only happened because, well, actually, some of you helped it to happen, and you don't even know that. So before I'm finished, I will explain to you why some of you have helped this project to happen without even knowing it. So that's something to look forward to. But this story isn't really about tomatoes and peppers. I could tell you, if you grow tomatoes in a greenhouse in Malawi, you will get, from each plant, you will get 3 times as many tomatoes as you would growing in a field. So that's 3 times as much income. I could tell you that when you grow in a greenhouse, tomatoes or peppers, they will be much better quality. And because of that, they have longer shelf life. So we work with this cooperative and we enable them to sell 95% of what they grow. Now, the average in Malawi is 60%. So that's 35% more. That's a third increase in income just from that single step of growing higher quality tomatoes. And then, of course, you're growing in a greenhouse. And because you're growing in a greenhouse, you can grow all year. It's a controlled environment. So you can grow not 1 crop, but 2 crops. So you can grow even more. But no, I said I wasn't going to tell you about tomatoes and peppers. So that's not really the purpose, because I think I'm then selling the story short. Because I think this is about nothing less than the economic empowerment of women. And if you know anything about international development, and I mean, here we are, a room full of experts, you will know that economic development of women, economic empowerment of women, is one of the key things that can change everything. It has to be women, not men. You empower the men, I've had this experience, you empower the men to grow things, and it does wonders for the sale of motorbikes and beer. And now, and before you think that maybe I'm being a bit harsh on Malawian men, actually, there's loads of communities in Scotland where something like that happens as well. So it's certainly not just a Malawian thing. But if women are economically empowered, they will spend the money for the benefit of the whole family. The nutrition of the children will improve. They'll improve the house. So the very fabric of the house will improve. School fees will be paid, including for girls, not just for the boys. That's an important change. All these things happen when you empower women economically. And actually, there's some much bigger things happen as well, because, Malawi has a big challenge with a fast-growing population. Well, if you want to reduce the average household size and the number of children that women have, economically empower these women. It just takes care of itself. There's all kinds of good things happen if women are economically empowered. So that's the story here. Because these, we had to change the slide just a minute ago, because at the top, it didn't say Peace Farm, it said Malawi Fruits Greenhouses. And they're not Malawi Fruits Greenhouses. They belong to Martha and her friends. They're their greenhouses, because they're empowered. They've got the greenhouses. Now, to make that happen, it's a whole journey that you have to go on. In the northern region of Malawi, women don't have access to farmland. It's different from the southern region. Some of you work in the south and it's quite different. But in the north, the land's passed down through the male side of the family. But if you grow in greenhouses, you grow in sacks, you don't need farmland. You can put your greenhouse anywhere you like and grow your tomatoes. Women in the northern region of Malawi, but I guess this is true across the whole of Malawi, they're last in the queue when it comes to farmer training. The men get trained first. It's much harder for women to access good training. And it's certainly hard for women to access finance to get assets like greenhouses. So we've had to pull all that together to make this story happen. And the reason I said that some of you were involved in that story, about 400 yards away from my house, there's a little co-op, one of these little co-op convenience stores. I went there last night. I bought some tomatoes, actually, for the earth. And I got a bag to put them in. Now, if you've got a co-op near you, or ScotMed, or any of these, if you're disorganised like me, you go shopping and you forget to take a bag, so you have to buy a bag, and it'll cost you 20 pence. That's what co-op charge. They're not very strong bags, but that's what they do. And they've got a sign up, and the sign says, all the proceeds from the sale of our bags go to charity. And if you're cynical at all, you think, do they though? Do they really go to charity? Well, in the co-op, all the 20 pences go to a thing called the Co-op Foundation. And the Co-op Foundation gave us the money to build all these greenhouses and put in a borehole and put in the solar pumps. So if any of you in this audience have ever bought a bag from the Co-op, then you have been part of Martha's story and part of the empowerment of these women to enable them to get their greenhouses. So thank you very much for that.
Steve, can I introduce you as Steve and your cows and chickens and things?
Sort of, yes.
Yeah.
But very much in my past. But yeah, before I go on, I'm just going to tell another little anecdote which relates to investing in women. This came from many years ago when I was working in Papua New Guinea, and I arrived there just as women got the vote, and just as we were going into an election, and a politician came up to me and said, I'm absolutely distraught about this thing about women getting the vote. It's terrible. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, I used to be able to buy votes with beer. Now I have to use real money. So my name's Steve Sloan. Most people know me for having sold a charity to, an idea of a charity to Bill Gates and having that charity funded by him. I'm afraid I only got about a week's notice for this, so I had a really busy week, so I wasn't really able to, yeah, there you go. So I wasn't really in a position to do much preparation. So really my preparation was down to the trip up here this morning from where I live in Cumnock. And that's my excuse of saying if I'm talking complete codswallop, that's what it's all about. But the other way to look upon it is it's just going to be for 10. I'm just taking 10 minutes out of the rest of your life, so stick with it. What I'm going to be talking about is the importance of storytelling when you are reporting back to your donors. You might have thought if I'm talking about impact, then what I'm are people hearing this at the back? Good. Okay, fine. You might have thought if I'm talking about impact, I'm going to be talking about metrics and data and stuff like that. But for me, actually, storytelling is just as important. Is there anybody here from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? Good. I can say whatever I like then. That's great. The reason I'm saying that is because in my experience, and don't believe that I'm saying bad things about them because they were the most wonderful donor partners that I've ever had. But they were obsessed with data. I mean, if I give you a picture, I mean, if anybody wants to ask me what they asked of us before we ever got our grant, then do that in the question time. But when we got our grant, they came to us and said, well, right, okay, this is how we expect you to report back to us. There are 9 areas that we want you to report back on. Of those 9 areas, we're going to establish around about 400 KPIs, key performance indicators. And on top of that, we're expecting you to report on something like 1,300 decision points monthly. My response to them was, we're not going to do that because we're a little organisation and we just aren't in a position to do that. Because to be blunt, if you ask me to do that, then I will be able to tell you now what the result will be. And that's what I'll be reporting 0 progress because we've been spending all of our time reporting and none of it actually doing anything. So we ended up actually reporting once every 3 months instead. And I think probably our Gates handler needed therapy in the 2 months in between just to cope with the process of not getting what they needed. But the question that really raised for me was, is this all about data? Isn't all our reporting really about data? And I think not. And what I want to do is tell you a little story. I'm afraid it doesn't come from Malawi, it comes from India. And this story was about, well, I was there around about 6 months before I finished as chief executive of GalvMed. And we went up to Orissa because the statistics, the data told us we really ought to go there. And we want to talk about Newcastle disease and vaccines and the importance of vaccines with Newcastle disease. Now, if you don't know Newcastle disease, this isn't something where you suddenly wake up in the morning talking Geordie, but it's a disease of poultry, and it's something where basically, if you don't vaccinate your chickens, then you'll find that possibly and possibly not. And that's the thing, it's unpredictable. You could have a whole flock at the beginning of the week and then no birds alive at all at the end of the week. But a 1 cent vaccine in those days, it's probably a bit more now, but a 1 cent vaccine could protect your chickens. So I went out to Orissa to talk about this, amongst other things, with my team. And I talked to a women's collective out there. And it was one of those moments where it was kind of, it was a kind of a cultural quietness in the room in which I was talking. But that, I mean, you know, I was speaking, but I wasn't sure whether or not people were, they were hearing, but were they listening, or were they listening or were they hearing? I'm not sure which way it should be. But I wasn't sure as to whether or not the message had really gone down. And I didn't get that message until sometime after I'd finished as the chief executive of GovMed. And the message came from actually none other than Stuart Brown, who was my communications director at that point in time. And it went something like this. The ladies in the Women's Collective and the leader of the Women's Collective wanted me to tell you something, because we've been out there and we've seen the impact of the work that we've been doing. And it goes something like this. The lady wanted me to say, please tell the short, fat, white, bald man with the glasses, I think it was the glasses that gave it away, that we are now vaccinating our chickens. And the outcome of that is that we are now in a position to afford to send our children to school consistently for the first time. Now, I want to put something to you. We did a lot of work on that, a lot of stuff in relation to data and statistics. But 14 years on, can I remember any of those statistics? Of course I can't. But if I close my eyes, I can still see the woman who said that. And I can still see the community in which I was speaking. And I can still see the children who were not in school. And for me, that really talks about the importance of storytelling, because the authenticity of our relationship with our donors comes through what comes out of the mouths of the people who we would see as our beneficiaries. I think it was actually summarized earlier on, virtually the first words of this conference, and it was said by Tracy, this has to be grounded in people. And that is probably the most important message that I can give you in connection with this. Please do your data, because that's kind of a point of entry in terms of reporting to your donors. But please also tell your stories, because that is incredibly important. And that's really the message I wanted to leave you with. But I just wanted to, if you will allow me just a moment of self-indulgence. It occurred to me when I was coming up here that I first started in charity fundraising when I was aged 23. It also occurred to me as I was coming up here that this week represents 50 years of doing that for me. And really what I want to say to you is thank you for being a great golden audience. Thank you.
Kevin, just a little bit of advice from a Scottish woman. Those bags are fully compostable and you can put your food waste in them. Just in case you didn't know. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm probably going to talk about something slightly different. I'm going to be talking about a story approach, it's called Storyline, that we've been taking in Malawi. I'm part of a wider research project on global public health. And the area that I'm involved in is looking at particularly social and emotional well-being of young people aged 10 to 14. I want to start off with a quote. It was a colleague in Malawi who turned up at a meeting last year and said, you know, when we're working with young people, how do we really engage them? How do we get that participation and voice? And working in the area of well-being, that's always a challenge. So we're talking about things that can be very, very difficult, very sensitive. So I was really keen to make that a reality. And she said, when you invite me to the table, who is ordering my food? And that was something that I thought, I'm going to take that as a sort of, not me, but our team, because I'm part of a small team, as a sort of guiding principle in how we want to approach how we actually work and engage and involve and collaborate with young people in Malawi to really find out what are the big issues for them in terms of their development, how they thrive, and what does mental well-being mean to them. Ultimately, to see what are the things that maybe we can start to do to improve or to have some tangible things that can be put in as an intervention. So that would be the long-term goal. Our story, we're just in the middle of it. And I'm going to start off by showing you the middle part. Are we able to play? It's just a very short video clip here.
Mchikutambuya motakhalapo zaka anapiye kumakonkhomoka wabwino ungwiro makolo kutiphunzitsa ndipo msinkhu pakudza anyamata zosangalatsa takhalapi mdima pakudzadza nalija maungu mbatata zilipoteloko ankatiuza agogo zamalangizo mbuku la akoma kagonera akali wakha makhalidwe kumvera kudzichepetsa inde titsate kotero bondo kunong'oneza pamawa sitingachite sukulu iyi kulimbikira tichite monga mfuna njira makwacha tikagonere choncho athu maloto mmazira sangafere kupemphera achinyamata ukhale mtsamiro wathu tinkaphunzira mmasiku akuchidendene kupemphera tichite mowa kusuta mmaenje tipilire ngati fukizi olembedwayo inde tsogolo sitidzakhala naye na malenga onyasa makhalidwe iye alibe.
So this was at the end of a 2-day process where we were looking at emotional and social well-being and many other issues to do with well-being. I don't know the full context of this. It's only been sent to my colleagues in Malawi who are doing the research. But I know this young boy was voted the best overall poem at the end of the 2-day project, which really encompassed all of his feelings about well-being. And for him, the single key to good well-being was education. Education that helps you to explore your dreams or to realise your dreams, and the opportunities that education affords that helps to overcome some of the conditions that you're living through. What we used in the research in Malawi, I'm going to go back a wee bit in time here in Scotland to 1967. There was a methodology developed called storyline, and that's exactly what it does. It takes the structure of a story. We all know a good story: beginning, middle, end, characters, setting. And it then uses that to explore issues, themes, ideas. It was developed as a way of exploring social studies education. Since then, it's known throughout the world as the Scottish storyline approach. It's used in over 40 countries in the world. And I have used it very successfully while teaching health education and thought this would be an ideal way to really engage young people. So we started off, it was 2 days spent in Blantyre in a community centre. And what we were doing is the young people, we were setting up, we used the theme of families in the community. So when they came along, rather than being themselves, they made up imaginary characters. It was colourful, it was creative. And for each character, they were put into a family. They decided themselves the family structure, the names. We gave them one instruction: you must have a 13-year-old child in your family. And from this structure and this framework, we went on to look at lots of issues about daily life. What brings you joy, happiness, and helps you to thrive living in this imaginary community that we've developed for your family? And the results we saw from that, compared to maybe what we were used to doing, more traditional interview questions, focus groups. If I described it in terms of colour, I would say it went from being monotone to extremely colourful. And I hope the pictures here give some sense of what that felt like. The only way I can describe it is that when the two researchers carrying this out called me back in Scotland, and I was very nervous thinking, oh, how did it go? They were very emotional, and I'll explain at the end why they were so emotional. But here we can see the sort of the characters and the ideas that the young people had started to write down. Now, right at the start, I said to them, please try and make it as inclusive as possible. We had children who were out of school, young children who were in school, And they were very much divided when they turned up on the first day. Within 2 days or within an hour, the researchers said we couldn't tell the difference. And in fact, for young people who couldn't write, they were embraced, they were helped, and it became a very collaborative, inclusive environment. And I think for us, that was really, really important. What we see here is that the questions then started to probe a bit more deeply. Themes like bullying, family abuse, were some of the subjects that they were discussing it. But using a storyline approach in health education, whether it's teaching or research, provides a safe space. And it's not just about why, it's about probing the why. It's about how do you feel about that and what's the behaviour. So it's more about digging into and bringing out the emotional feeling that young people have. And that's that human connection that Joe talked about at the start. It has to be a truly collaborative process to really make it work. Just finally, just to sort of show how it started to develop, we let them choose how they wanted to explain some of the ideas their family group had come up with. And we left it up to them. This young girl that we see at the top came up with a folk tale. And when we asked her, would you like to read this out? She said, no. And they said, but it's really good. And she said, no, because everybody will laugh at me and I never do anything like that. So with a bit of encouragement, she stood up, I believe like this to begin with. And as she read it, she saw people smiling and at the end, everybody clapped and said, that was absolutely amazing. And for me, just to hear that sort of out, because it's not just about what we're taking away, it's about the experience that the young people themselves have. It's about their development of agency and feeling that their voice matters, that they have value, regardless of whether they're in school or out of school, or the daily lives that they're actually living. And is that the final? Yeah. That's the final one. Sorry, so when I said the researchers were very emotional, and they called and I said, how did it go? And they said, oh, excuse me, I need to have this on so I can show this this phrase. Do I need to show it to you or you remember it? Yeah, and they said that the children didn't go home at the end of the day. While they were clearing up, they waited and they lined the street. And as they drove by, they started chasing the car, shouting.
If you're from Malawi, I'm sure you're gonna know this phrase. It says "Musazafe, muzangu sowa." Yeah. So it means you shouldn't die, but you should just disappear. So regarded as death is a bad thing, but just disappear.
So I was initially confused, saying, "What?" And they said, "No, this is really good." And nobody's ever shouted this to me. And that's when I say, that's the difference between monotone and colourful. It was an emotional experience for the researchers who realised that you can see in any of these pictures, there's no research involved. You just need to set a good framework, and that's what Storyline provided. It provided an ideal framework. Thank you very much.
Well, after those lovely stories, this is all going to sound a little bit mechanistic, but I wanted to tell you about a tool that we've been using in our Maldent project, the tool of blogging. So I think I'm a little bit of a frustrated journalist. Susan Dalgetty would laugh at that, I'm sure, if she were here today, a professional. But I've always enjoyed writing. And when we got our grant for the Maldent project, I decided I'd try and write up a step-by-step story of how the work was developing. And of course, at that stage, we had no idea how well things would go. I self-taught myself from YouTube how to use word process as a blogging platform. We've now published 170 posts and continue to post on a regular basis. And one of the really useful things about it is you can put in hot links. So you can refer to other people's websites, or you can refer back to earlier blog posts that you've published. And the way I do it, which I'm sure is very amateur, is that when I'm involved in activities, I'm writing in my head what I think I want to say, and then I take pictures that I think I can use to illustrate the words. And actually, the pictures are much more valuable than the words. That's what I've realized. So lots of pictures, not too many words. It's the photos that excite. And then as soon as the posts are published, I put them through on LinkedIn, I put them out on Facebook, I put them out on X, because there are different groups of people on those different platforms. So I want to talk a little bit about the advantages first of all, and then at the end I think Nassim's going to let me loose on her computer if I speak to her nicely, and I can just illustrate one or two of the points that I want to make. The first thing is it definitely develops a following. It does allow you to spread the word. And on the front page, when you open up the blog, there's a place where you can put your email address so that if you want to see posts as they're published, you'll get an email, which will include the content of the post to keep you up to speed. It's also, I think, a very easy way for other organizations like SMP to further amplify the voice. And I'm very grateful to Nassim and the team who, on occasion, will take a blog post that we've published. It's very easy for Nassim to drop the link in, and you don't need too many words. Take a picture out of the blog. So it helps other organizations if they want to publicize what you're doing. It can also link you up with other partners. I'm now very involved with a charity called Amica, run by a lady called Ruthie Marcus in Blantyre. And one of the roles of Amica is to try to improve public health facilities or primary care health facilities in Blantyre district. And the reason that Ruthie got to know about what we were doing in dentistry is directly attributed to the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, because Amica is a member of the SMP. And one of the stories that had been put into the newsletter, she read, she had a problem with the dental clinic at a health centre they were doing up called Chilamoni Health Centre. Contacted me cold. We'd never met each other before. And as a result of that, we're now working closely together as partners. So that was a huge value of the blog. It can attract support, and that might be in-kind support. So we've had a huge amount of support from a company called Henry Schein. They don't give us lots of money, but they're prepared to send technicians out, fully funded, to help us install equipment. That's really valuable as a donation. And something I want to come back to that Steve mentioned is acknowledging sponsors, writing reports. Now, so often when you have to fill in a template, you're limited to 250 words. And it's really difficult to say what you want to say. But if you can say, if you want to know about this particular aspect, you can find it here, put in a hot link, they go to the story that you've written about that particular element on your blog. It also provides a free platform for collaborators to share their stories. So if you're working with others, then they can put a blog out. Now, I'd hoped when I set this up that actually most of the content would be written by Malawian collaborators. Didn't start like that, but once we got the ball rolling, I've then managed to encourage many of those we work with to put material together, and we publish it on their behalf. So what's required? Well, you need a domain name. There's a small annual fee for that, 15, 20 pounds. It's not expensive. What is a bit more expensive is your annual fee, in my case, to WordPress. And for me, it's about £280 a year. I see that as very good value for the benefit I think we've had from the blog, but that is a cost. And the other thing, of course, you need is time and inclination to write. And I think that for an average sized post that we put out, I probably spend about 5 hours. By the time I've got the photos in, got the narrative written, checked it, made sure all the links work, make sure that, and I completely accept that unless you're a real enthusiast, you know, that's probably a little bit above and beyond. But I think as a tool for telling story and telling a long story with the ability to link back to earlier parts in that journey, I think it's very valuable. So I wonder, Nassim, do I come and sit at your laptop? I can do it here. Just very briefly, just show you some of these things. So here's an example. This first one, this is the most recent one. This is a guest post. This was a Birmingham dental student who heard us talk about the Maldent project a few months ago. She is of Nigerian parentage and wanted to do her elective in Malawi. So we arranged for her to spend a month with our Maldent project team. And while she was there, she met this lady Mutoni, who's a final year dental student there in Malawi. They formed a strong friendship. They did a lot of work with mothers and children together. And they're actually both now doing an online course based in the US this year on global oral health. That in itself, I think, is a lovely little story. And Amy Blake's in the audience. Amy has fair trade electives, a little plug for you. But it just shows the potential benefit of an elective. That's a story in itself. The next one, we're building a new dental school building at the moment. Some of you may have been at the CPG we had. But this is a second blog I've written about it. So what I'm able to do is say, well, in a previous post, this is where it started, but now this is where we're going next. And there'll be further posts about the building. In terms of, as I said, reporting back to sponsors, donors, grant awarders, and so on, being able to put these hot links into reports save loads of words. And you can get loads of pictures in there. People, if they go to that hot link, they'll see the images as well. And I still think images are a very important part of storytelling. So I think I'll leave it there. If any of you want to talk to me about blogging afterwards, very happy to pick it up. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank all four of you for speaking so beautifully about impact stories. And I know I've got a few questions, and I'm sure everyone else has some for our four people. I mean, we've got big stories within, well, big stories in small projects, and we've got big stories in big projects. So we've got the first dental school in Malawi. That's a huge project, but the tiny moment where you, Jeremy, met with Susie, and then it, you know, you're now super involved. You're the Scottish lead on it. Monica, who very kindly stepped in to do this, but we are the first people to hear about this particular project. Now, this is part of many projects with Strathclyde and with that has big funding, she says. But this is a small, but I've got some questions about what's next for that. That would be amazing. And Steve, also GalvMed turned into, I mean, that was a huge, huge grant that you had from Gates, but the point was, it was the small moment that became sort of transformational. And I know that Kevin's work with Malawi Fruits is very much about what happens next in the steps of the impact where people take ownership themselves. So I think, I don't know how long we've got, and I'm not sure where Chad has gone. Oh, there he is, the man himself. Because because we wanted to open this up to everyone. But I did want to ask Monica first, if I may, because as you had said to me when we spoke the other day, it was quite a low stakes, low investment, but the possibilities are for something bigger.
Yeah. I don't think Tracy would be happy with me saying that. Because we are obviously being funded to do all of the research. Yes. You know, taking that aside, the actual sorry, is that Major? I don't know. The actual approach of going out and doing this research, it didn't need any technology. Mm-hmm. And in fact, even if you didn't have, we basically had some fabric, wool, glue and scissors, some paper. They took some balloons and some sweets, as I suggested, to have some fun games to make it fun. You could use whatever local resources are available. They could actually have done it going out and collecting, you know, sticks or stones and making designs or whatever. So I wanted to do something that didn't involve. Photo voice is another really creative way of working with young people. And we have used that successfully, but it also needs the technology to work, and that doesn't always happen, you know, in Malawi. And in fact, even in Scotland, when we're using the storyline approach, actually children and young people really like getting their hands on materials and resources. But what that does, it creates time and space for them to talk to each other, get to know each other, and I think that's the most important part, is giving that sense of safe space, collaboration, supporting each other, and also creating an imaginary character. You think back to when you were children, not even children, but they like to work through that. Imagination is really important. So what it does, it takes it away from talking about their personal life, but actually what they're bringing to it is they're bringing their knowledge, their experience, their lived experience, and talking about it through this character or this imaginary scenario that they've developed as part of their family. And that's where it's really important, and it was a great technique. I think that could be easily replicated.
Thanks, Monica. So, I would like to ask anybody here, or in this floor, people, if they got any stories they would like to share or questions that they would like to also ask about storytelling, about impact.
I was just going to ask a very quick question to Jeremy. You mentioned the word press, and it looked brilliant, and I can appreciate the standards that you've set and you want to do that. Did you have any free alternatives that didn't involve paying for?
Right. So to be honest, I didn't. I started on a very low subscription, and they always get you. So once I loaded up a few photographs and videos, suddenly I needed to go the next level up in order to get sufficient memory for the volume of photos and videos that I was embedding. So I'm sorry, I can't really help you with other, and because, I mean, I'll be quite honest, I'm not a techie IT savvy person at all, which just shows even an old person like me can actually learn to do this sort of thing. But no, I didn't look at other options. Others may have knowledge of this or insight.
I've been on exactly the same journey as you. I'm only about £120 a year though.
We use Wix, which is the free version of Wix, but you have to have an advert for Wix on the top of it. But that's, I don't know, but Wix I think is very easy to try.
Yeah. I think the other thing I found with WordPress is it is actually very easy to use, and that's again something I need, because if I've got to do all sorts of computer programming or something to do it, I'm hopeless. So.
No, I just found the tomato project very interesting. And you said it was in Belene. I'm from Zuzu, so that's a very familiar place. I just wondered how the project then continues. So they've started, they are doing the tomato business, and then after that, what happens? Is this like the profit is reinvested, or what happens? How is it going to sustain itself in return?
Yeah, so sustainability is absolutely key, and that's why I made the point of saying the greenhouses belong to the women. So we find ways of funding it. So the funding that we got from the Co-op Foundation was to enable us to put the greenhouses there, and then the women had to sell the tomatoes to us. We collected a share of the crop to recover the cost of the greenhouses, so that we could then help someone else. So they have genuinely paid for them themselves. It's just it was paid up front. So we feel that by them having that strong sense of ownership, it's their business. The harder they work, the better crops they get, the more money they make. They then have to make decisions about whether they want to continue expanding, bring in more women into cooperative, or just enjoy a higher level of income. And we don't try and control that, because it's their business. Yeah, and also now that the greenhouses have been paid for, we don't insist that they sell to us. That was only during that period. So if they want to sell elsewhere, they can. And across other projects, we find some choose to keep selling to us because it's easier, and others find their own markets.
Okay, so I'm Lisa, I'm from Zimbabwe. Thank you so much for the projects. So where I come from, they also have similar projects, and some organizations help women and men to have projects. Fishery, it could be tomatoes, it could be whatever. But I've also realized a gap in terms of training. They might know how to plant them, they might know how to basically grow them. But what do you do in terms of upskilling them business-wise? And then, two questions.
Yeah.
And then, how do you manage the different dynamics of households? As you said, empowering a woman is important. And if you empower a woman, you empower the whole generation. But we have an issue where sometimes, because of the different dynamics, men don't like that.
Yeah.
And how are you able to deal with that? Because you're empowering the woman is not bringing in the money, but where I come from, when it's like that, the households shake.
Yeah.
How are you able to help them in that area?
With mixed success is the answer to that. I don't have a great answer to that question. I just know that empowering the women in that way has a positive effect. Yes, there could be a negative effect. Some of the men in the village get upset that they're not getting the opportunity. We have other projects where we work with male farmers. The reason the greenhouses are targeted to women is because of that land ownership question, so they can grow in the sacks. So we can provide solar irrigation pumps to male farmers, and because they've got the land and they can grow on the land. So we don't exclusively, well, the greenhouses are exclusive with women, but we don't exclusively work with women, if that makes sense. But I think sometimes, what's the saying about the perfect is the enemy of the good? You know, I think sometimes, you know, you can say, but there's this problem and there's this problem and this problem, and you just become paralysed and you don't actually do anything. So I would rather do some good and leave some other problems for other people to pick up. That's an honest answer.
Listening to all of those stories is wonderful, for me, I've worked as a donor as well as being somebody who's looked for funding. And as a donor, one of the things that I see, particularly in reporting, but also in terms of people putting together applications for funding, I see people using far too many words. I get very, very wordy applications, and kind of think to yourself, what does it actually say? So there's an exercise that I do when I'm training new fundraisers, and probably Joe has been through this process because I...
Not yesterday.
No, not. But as an exercise, what I do is I say to people, right, what I want you to do is to close your eyes, and I want you to think about something that you can do in the next 24 hours. Keep it clean, but something you can do in the next 24 hours. Close your eyes and think about it, and answer me this question. As you're thinking about that, are you seeing words or are you seeing pictures? Because your job is to describe those pictures. That's the way in which you're able to get a message across. It's by describing what you were seeing. Put the words to one side, try and describe the pictures.